All right, so if you haven't heard, this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing has gone absolutely viral. A lot of people are talking about it. I want to make some comments, go over a summary of the progression of events very quickly, and then talk about the implications, and especially from a spiritual perspective, as well as this whole Great Awakening and this whole white hat movement, so to speak. And so, first, let's talk about what actually happened in the very beginning and then what led up to what it is now. So, when the news first broke, people were using all kinds of words. He was fired, he was suspended, it was pulled off air indefinitely. But a spokesperson specifically said this past Wednesday, that Jimmy Kimmel Live will be preempted indefinitely. And so this came after some backlash from some affiliate networks, especially Nexstar, and just a lot of things were kind of like boiling. And this was actually because of what he said on a previous show, maybe I think the night before or over the weekend, especially after Charlie Kirk and his death. So Jimmy Kimmel said, quote, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of somebody Trump, called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish." Okay, and so he was saying a bunch of stuff about it, but essentially the key message was to combine the murderer, his political ideology, and tie it to MAGA, to Trump, and to all the conservatives. And so it greatly upset people, obviously, because this guy, although he came from, and talking about Tyler Robinson, the killer, a presumably, conservative family where his father and other, members of the family claim and have shown to be, I guess, conservative. But this person was a radical, liberal or woke ideology person, talking about, his trans, a person and partner and just all these different things that have come from that. And so because of this, there's lots of backlash, especially from the FCC chairman. And this comes from an interview, I think in the first day or so, with Benny Johnson, where he was threatening immediate action against Jimmy Kimmel, ABC, and Disney for deliberately misleading the public by claiming Charlie Kirk's assassin was a MAGA conservative. And so Chairman Carr called Kimmel's malicious lies truly sick, and said that those responsible should immediately suspend him, and may even lead to ABC losing its broadcast license. And so because of this looming sort of, I don't want to say threat, but just the adhering to accountability and standards, especially against hate speech and all that stuff, that they had a strong case to hold Kimmel, ABC, and Disney accountable for spreading dangerous, politically motivated misinformation. And so because of that, and it was obviously a lie in that sense, but this apparently was a little bit of that snowball effect from the outside in perspective. But really, come to find out a couple days later that more news was breaking. So Rolling Stone talked about how hours leading up to the decision to pull Jimmy Kimmel, two sources familiar with the matter said that senior executives at ABC, its owner Disney, and affiliates convened emergency meetings to figure out how to minimize the damage. And so this is reported from Rolling Stone, and that multiple execs felt that Kimmel had not actually said anything over the line, two sources said, but the threat of the Trump administration retaliation loomed. So again, the key thing here is they didn't think, and again, talking about their morality and how they digest this information, they were thinking that it was of Trump. So this is what came out initially. And of course, as a back and forth, Trump, through various press conferences, talked about praising, FCC chair Brendan Carr for holding networks accountable, and specifically talking about this particular issue, and had even posted a truth about it, saying after he was canceled that this is great for America, great news for America. The ratings challenged Jimmy Kimmel show that Jimmy Kimmel is canceled. And so he's effectively, excited about it. And he was sort of throwing others under the bus with Colbert, Stephen Colbert, and then Jimmy and Seth. But this was all part of this, I guess, narrative that there was this top-down effect of accountability and pressure coming from conservatives or Trump, the White Hats, the FCC, however you want to group that together. But you got to remember, Jimmy Kimmel and Trump specifically don't have good terms, because if you remember back in 2021 when Trump was suspended, remember the very, infamous instance of him being suspended, his account being suspended on Twitter. This was Jimmy Kimmel's reaction. He said, live look, Trump's bathroom, and just kind of mocking his small hands and being on the toilet and seeing that he was suspended. This is what he had said. Now, up to now, which was like the first day or two, people were thinking, oh, this was like, the immoral people that don't have accountability because of, what Rolling Stone and others have said. They thought it was, appropriate, but they just were afraid of the FCC and Trump. That was what it was. But then later, the Wall Street Journal broke, and I think New York Times as well, about some more insider stuff, like what actually went down behind the scenes. And so one of the things that they mentioned, that they reported, was that Kimmel had planned to address Carr's comments on his show Wednesday night. So this is following his initial show, the inappropriate comments, the backlash, the FCC, Trump's comments, all of that stuff. And then what he was going to do was effectively double down on what he said. And so before his on-air appearance, Dana Walden, co-chairman of Disney Entertainment, spoke to the host about his plan, because people, Bob Iger as well as Dana, they were curious about what Kimmel was going to do to address the situation. Sources say he planned to defend what he said rather than kowtowing to the outrage. Disney thought that would fan the flames. And so that conversation between Kimmel and Walden apparently said that with she and other senior executives, that the star's approach, Kimmel's approach, could make the situation worse. And executives discussed staff safety, including threatening emails on Kimmel's show of their staff that they received allegedly about after Carr's remarks, and posting some of their personal information online, so doxing. So Walden huddled with her team and the chief executive, Bob Iger, before the two executives decided to temporarily take Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air. And so my guess is that they were going to let, the dust settle. And the way it works sometimes is that they don't really like completely dissolve the show, or rather in the past of some other instances, but they kind of let it cool, and then they just, bring it back up after everything kind of died down. But they decided that they would inform Kimmel of the decision, and that a person close to the show said that Kimmel was planning to say that his words were being purposely twisted by some members of the MAGA movement. So again, trying to double down. So apparently after that conversation, they thought the answer was not satisfactory to management. So advertisers started to call in, and they had threatened, among the big affiliate conglomerates, Nexstar and Sinclair. And again, these guys, they own, and I don't know the stats, but I've heard they own like a large part, not the majority, but a large part of local markets. So they own certain markets like, local Chicago or local DC, that ABC network, and they broadcast and syndicate whatever it is that they decide to do. And so they sort of have that power over them. Again, this is top down. This is a corporation. So you are employed by this company, you have contracts, and so it's all legal in the sense. So they threatened to preempt the show. And a second source says that the blowback was snowballing enough that had ABC not acted, Kimmel's show would have been dark in a large swath of the country, even beyond Sinclair and Nexstar territories, because of the advertisers and others as it was snowballing. And again, Kimmel's planned on-air address was not making it, quote, making it worse, but that he simply wasn't, quote, kowtowing to the outrage. And the plan apparently was to address, not with an apology on Wednesday for the next show, but he was going to, maybe make more jokes or address the situation on air, and basically give this tone-deaf, like fan the flames type of response, making it even worse. And what you got to understand about the situation was that this was not looking good and people show these charts for like ratings, it was dipping, and they wanted an excuse to eventually pull the show in some sense. So who knows what's going on in some sense with regards to the conspiracy or sort of like face value behind the scenes, like actual stuff. But what's true is that people were waking up. People were understanding what's actually going on with Kimmel, with these talk show hosts as well in general, with the whole of media. And so this guy, Ben Leo, and the host here on GB News were talking about some of these things. And I believe it was just a good summary of some of the sentiment, especially from those that really are awakened, not woke, but awakened to what's going on. So I just want to show a quick clip of this.
Kimmel cancelled rightly, or has he been thrown under the bus unceremoniously?
No, he's been rightly cancelled. I don't even know if it's a cancellation. Everybody keeps saying, oh, this is a violation of the First Amendment, of free speech. This isn't a free speech issue. Jimmy Kimmel is an employee of a company. If he had his own show on his own website, and let's say the government silenced him or canceled the website, that's a free speech issue. But here you work for a company, you're supposed to be a comedian, you're not funny, the joke wasn't funny, you are offensive, and you have low ratings, so you're going to be fired. It's sort of like Stephen Colbert, right? He was running a $40 million deficit. He wasn't funny. He wasn't interesting. Guess what? They canceled him. It wasn't about politics. It was about follow the money. You're not doing that well. But what's interesting is that the folks on the left, they're more upset about Jimmy Kimmel being put on pause, put on leave, than they are Charlie Kirk, who was violently assassinated. So these people are hypocrites, and it's why I don't take them seriously. I have no sympathy for Jimmy Kimmel. He's not that funny. He's basically a partisan hack. And if you're going to make a joke about Charlie Kirk's death, you're a pretty disgusting person.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think lots of our viewers would agree as well. The argument, though, Link, from the left is that President Trump installed Brendan Carr into the FCC, the sort of regulator here, which manages all the tops of American news networks, including ABC. And Carr is now hauling all those networks before the commission and clamping down on them for various issues. They're saying it's politically motivated. Trump's just put his guy into the FCC. Do you see anything in that?
No, I actually don't think it's politically motivated at all. You know, President Trump is very busy. I think people are overestimating how much time he's spending on ABC and Disney Company and all of their shows and their networks. I think he's busy running the country. I think the bottom line here is Jimmy Kimmel, the joke wasn't funny. It was offensive. He also straight up lied. Let's say he's not a comedian. He's a journalist. You lied. You said the killer was a right-wing MAGA guy, conservative. Why would the killer be MAGA conservative? Everything shows he's the complete opposite.
And what's happening across the world is that people are waking up to the hypocrisy of what's happening with people, especially on air, that are commenting about this double standards. A good example is what MSNBC's Chris Hayes said on Kimmel getting fired versus what he said about Tucker Carlson getting fired. So this was put together very nicely by Western Lesbian. So let's just watch very quickly.
ABC made the announcement Kimmel would indeed be taken off the air indefinitely. And this is just the latest chapter in Donald Trump's ongoing campaign to crack down on free speech, dominate the media, and essentially render the First Amendment meaningless. So it was for the journeyman cable news host Tucker Carlson, just fired from his third network. He believed he could say anything, no matter how vile, no matter how disgusting, no matter how offensive, no matter dehumanizing or belittling. And if you act like a sociopath over and over and over and over, you will become unpopular on the national stage. That's just like a basic principle. Over time, probably not going to work out well for you in the long run. Eventually, people will be rightly offended, disgusted by it.
So if you didn't hear it, the summary here is that for a lot of those liberals or those on the left, when someone on the left gets fired for their words, it's hate speech. But when someone on the right gets fired for the words, they deserve it, quote unquote. And they, quote unquote, had it coming, just as in the case with Tucker Carlson versus with Jimmy Kimmel. And this reminds me of some of the themes that Q has talked about with regards to media. Number one, Operation Mockingbird, the, quote unquote, conspiracy of MSM, mainstream media, being controlled and suggesting that these news outlets are coordinated or manipulated. If you talk about fake news, remember, Trump in his first term talked a lot about propaganda and fake news. And in a lot of the posts, Q posts talking about think for yourself, the media is the enemy of the people, and claiming that press deceives the public for political agendas. Again, I'm just calling attention to some of the things that are top of mind for white hats and the proposed agenda to be able to clean house in the sense and awakening people, which again is part of this great public awakening. Going to the fifth one here, the Great Awakening. You are the news now is quoted a lot. So encouraging people to bypass mainstream media and share information yourselves. And also talking about media collusion, DNC, MSM coordination, puppets and puppet masters, allegations of journalists working with political elites, right? A lot of that, you know, a global elite and deep state stuff. And moving on to the censorship and control, meaning that they will attempt to silence you and control of the narrative is critical. So warning people of tech companies, censorship, broadcasters limiting speech. So all of that from some, I guess it's from both the right and the left. So people have to see it to believe it. And that actually reminds me of this Q post 4908, where it says sometimes you can't tell the public the truth. You must show them. Only then will people find the will to change. And this is part of this great awakening. And another one here, 4641, the swamp runs deep. Sometimes you cannot tell people the truth. You must show them. Only then, at the precipice, will people find the will to change. We, the people, have been betrayed for a very long time. Will you stand for God and country, for freedom, for humanity? Where we go one, we go all, the famous quote. And I don't want to go through all of these guys, but within the media over the years, you've seen lots of people fired, a lot of people removed, and I don't want to say even on the good side, but a lot of this sort of on the left and also on the right, people have to realize what it means. So even now you're seeing sort of the opposite effect from when Biden was allowing certain things, and then and again, I say Biden with quotes here because if you know, you know, and then with Trump, this whole awakening is happening on the other side, and now even the left is crying wolf over a lot of things that many of us during COVID and during that censorship, we were crying wolf in that sense. And so people are shown and exposed the hypocrisy. And what's happening now, in essence, from a spiritual perspective, from a global perspective, is that the prayers are being answered that many of you guys have prayed for, many of us over the years have prayed for, that the downfall of media would happen, specifically in the sense that the truth would be told, that wickedness and evil and all the stuff that's being disseminated would go away, and that God would, in his courts in heaven, that God would heal this land and allow the word to be projected. And the word, and I'll just quote a couple of verses here, shows what it means to actually be a good steward of words, right? Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 2, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. Media travels through the air. It's a reminder of these unseen spiritual influences. Matthew 12:36-37, for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. And 1 Corinthians 4:2, moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. So stewardship applies to every platform God entrusts to us. John 8:32, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Absolutely powerful. We're in a movement right now for which truth needs to be exposed and brought to light, and exposed, by that I mean in a good way, and then those that are deceitful, God would take care of them. But also we need to, just like how we discipline our children, we need to have accountability over this in the proper way. So the morality, the moral compass, so to speak, starting from, I don't know, Trump and the FCC chair, all the way across the whole world, it has to be one of a godly accord, one of a biblical standard. And so I know a lot of us are going to be, wrestling with this idea of, freedom of speech, free speech and all that. But where do you draw the line? You have to draw the line from a biblical perspective, because you don't want this hate speech. You don't want this inciting and doing misinformation. And I know many of us have struggled over the years, especially during COVID, of what actually is a truth, because we don't want to spread misinformation. But if you say this is misinformation and that's not misinformation, but it's actually vice versa, how are we going to cope with that? And so a lot of this we have to wrestle with. And so this is why we're in a time now of truly a great awakening, in how God is going to right the wrong, and he's going to allow our prayers to be answered, and biblical truths hopefully to be disseminated, which starts with knowing the truth, and that truth shall set you free. So again, be blessed, be encouraged, guys. A lot is coming out of this. I think it's a good time, but more and more it's going to progress. It's going to allow the wicked to expose themselves and just hyperventilate with what they're doing. But be hopeful, be strong, stay prayed up, and more is to come, guys. You guys know also that I'm doing a fundraiser. All the information, people were asking about certain details. All of it is also actually in the link down below. givesendgo.com/chrisyoonyt. Guys, I know I keep saying we're close, and I feel like that's maybe not motivating people to at least click, check it out, and help me out for the fundraiser. But I really need the support, guys, temporarily, as I continue my ventures here on mission in Korea, as well as with the legal battles. You guys know I'm also personally fighting my previous employer, who let me go for wrongful termination for speaking the truth, ironically, online over my platform on YouTube as I've grown. So I'm fighting that in court. I'm hoping in the federal courts we would win. I believe we will, but that's my personal thought, my personal take. But I need your guys' help to support for legal fees, as well as other things, that operating costs, as well as other stuff that is part of that. And also with just everything that I'm doing right now, helping my editors, people that are helping me out and working for me, just other things, a lot of costs. I really need the support, guys, temporarily. So if you guys want to help me out, would love it, would appreciate it. Again, the link is down below. I also have PayPal, Zelle, Venmo if you guys want to look at that, but would love it if you guys can do it on the website, givesendgo.com/chrisyoonyt. Guys, more to come. Stay tuned. It's a good time to be alive. God bless you guys.